I'm George Galloway, leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. Every week at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, I'll be addressing the members of the party, the supporters of the party, and those of you who are interested but not yet either a supporter or a member. In the course of events, we hope to persuade you to join us, at the very least follow us on Facebook and on Twitter so that you know our take on events. Well, what a day it's been. Boris Johnson sheepishly, through gritted teeth, offering a sort of half apology in the face of the forensic Keir Starmer, the leader of what we miscall the Labour Party in Britain. We miscall the leader of the opposition. If that's the leader of the opposition, it's no wonder that Boris Johnson is still standing after a myriad of scandals and blunders, the waste of tens of billions of pounds, and of course the deaths of more than 150,000 of our compatriots in the course of the coronavirus pandemic. It was like being savaged by a dead sheep. And I'm paraphrasing Dennis Healy when I say that Keir Starmer simply failed to land the knockout blow on Boris Johnson, even though he was very clearly on the ropes. Looking at his eyes, I never saw a more guilty expression on the face of a senior politician caught red-handed. Now, let me be absolutely clear about something. I have no real interest in whether or not there was a party in the garden of number 10 Downing Street. I have no interest in what they drank or what cheese they ate. I have no real interest in who was there. I'm interested in the hypocrisy of the matter, and about that there simply can be no doubt at all. Boris Johnson and other senior figures in the Conservative government, both politicians and civil servants, were doing exactly what that very day, indeed perhaps that very hour, they were telling the rest of us it was not permitted to do. They were gathering in such numbers as they forbade us to gather. They were partying in Downing Street on the day that people were having to virtually bury their close relatives. Yes, on Zoom. Funerals on Zoom. When people could not visit their dying relatives, sick relatives in care homes or in hospitals. When people could not hug their own mothers, their own children. When people were meeting in parks and having to distance themselves, shouting through the trees and the bushes at their own relatives for fear of being arrested. I'm not making that up. It actually was the case that in the very week that this latest, and there have been many now, party in Downing Street was taking place, the police were arresting people in parks. The police were stopping people playing tennis or cricket on the basis that whilst sport, this did not qualify as exercise. And the very police force that was making these arrests was on duty, one assumes in considerable number, in Downing Street. There's a little black bucky hut at the foot of Downing Street which has a plethora of cameras on which it's possible to see every part of the estate of 10 Downing Street, certainly including the garden. So the police were watching Boris Johnson and his friends frolicking and did nothing about it. But the same police force was arresting people in parks in Britain for breaches of the lockdown rules. Now, there are only two possible alternatives to this. The first is that though they were giving these draconian instructions to the rest of us, which the vast majority of us, being law-abiding people, were encouraged, forced to obey, they did not themselves believe the orders, the instructions, the regulations that they were issuing. Either they did not believe that the coronavirus danger was such that it was potentially fatal to gather in this way, even though they were telling us that it was, or we're governed by a caste, political and civil service, a caste of absolute idiots who did believe in the orders they were to take the risk for a glass of warm wine and a piece of cheddar cheese. Either way, this is not a caste that is capable of governing our country, capable of seeing us through these exceedingly difficult times, capable of piloting Brexit world in the way that we should already have been well in. Either way, Boris Johnson should resign, because that will solve our problems, not because it will miraculously abolish or banish the many troubles that we have. We have a sea of troubles. But if we have no confidence at all in the common sense of this Rabelaisian character, this, I don't know how to describe him, this cad, this bounder, this Rasputin, if we have no confidence at all in this Rasputin, how can he continue to be our Prime Minister? Of course, the Tories have got a big majority. He'll be replaced by another Tory, maybe a more electable one. I recognise the danger of that, but the danger, clear and present, of the next 3 years, 2.5 years or so, under this Tory government, led by Boris Johnson, is more of a concern to me than whether or not they pick someone more electable. They might pick someone less electable. And we'll come to the dead sheep, Keir Starmer, in the course of this talk. The second issue I wanted to raise, really en passant, because I don't myself believe that it is going to come to anything, but a lot of people have asked me about our Workers' Party's reaction to, response to the news, although it wasn't really news. Was it leaked or was it invented? Who knows? That Jeremy Corbyn, having given up the ghost on ever being allowed back into the Parliamentary Labour Party, and thus, of course, facing an official Labour candidate at the next general election if he decides to run again for re-election, has tired of waiting and has decided that he's going to form and lead, presumably, a new political party based on the Peace and Justice non-government organisation, but not a political party, that he founded a couple of years ago. I've got to say in parenthesis, I've not been massively impressed by the work of the Peace and Justice Foundation. Maybe it's just gone over my head or behind my back, but I haven't seen or felt any great output from that, which is not a great sign for transforming it into a political party. But let's assume, as a hypothesis, Mr. Corbyn does this. What would my reaction to it be? What would the Workers' Party's reaction to it be? Well, look, I have a lot of personal issues with Jeremy Corbyn, to whom I was extremely close for 35 years. Videos of me speaking in the House of Commons, you'll recognise the man sitting next to me. He used to make a particular point of coming to sit next to me in Parliament. Even when I was elected as a non-Labour MP after the by-election in Bradford West in 2012, and fair play to him for that. He was outside the protesting when I was being expelled by Tony Blair and Dr. John Reid and the other New Labour factotums in the NEC kangaroo court that kicked me out of the party after 36 years of membership at that point in time. So fair play to him. But despite that 35 years of friendship, I'm afraid to say that Mr. Corbyn and I are no longer on speaking terms. But that will not change my attitude if he decides finally to break with Keir Starmer and his miscalled Labour Party. I would welcome it. I would happily work with Jeremy Corbyn. You don't have to like somebody in order to work with them. Crikey, I wouldn't have done much work over the years if I had applied that rubric. So, whilst things will never be the same between Mr. Corbyn and myself, I look forward to joining with him in any development which breaks from a Labour Party that is a substantial part of the problem in Britain and nothing to do with the solution to the problem in Britain. We need to be a socialist party outside the Labour Party which can take the electoral fight to Labour, yes, of course, but that's not all that politics is about. Can argue collectively for a different kind of society than the one that we have and that has led us into so very much trouble and has so little idea as to how to get us out of that trouble. I don't know if parties will merge. There's our party, there's Chris Williamson's putative party. I don't know if it has registered as a party yet. There might be Mr. Corbyn's outfit, but some kind of coalition, some kind of coming together seems to me an inescapable responsibility of people like Mr. Corbyn, myself, and Chris Williamson, and maybe others. So we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to make it clear that my animus is not too strong a way to put it towards Mr. Corbyn personally, not how he treated me, but much more seriously. The many mistakes that were made during the period that he was the leader of the Labour Party, principally on Brexit, but not only on Brexit. Notwithstanding all of these things, I'm more than ready to let bygones be bygones and to work in a coordinated way with all people of goodwill to create an alternative to Keir Starmer's Blairite Labour Party. Now, on the subject of Blair, which was the subject I originally intended to exclusively address you on in this meeting, Tony Blair. 1 million people and climbing have already signed the petition on change.org. And if you're one of those who has not yet signed it, please do so. That petition demands that Her Majesty the Queen rescinds the decision to award not just a knighthood to Tony Blair, that's bad enough, but the highest order of knighthood, the top echelon, to reward him with elevation to the top echelon in Britain, the 24 blue chip, blue ribbon, top notchers in Britain. Tony Blair with that is simply a monstrosity of an idea, one which Prince Philip, the late Duke of Edinburgh, was not prepared to countenance. People ask me, how come it's taken 14 years since Tony Blair left office for this award to be given? The answer is that Prince Philip put his foot down, quite a considerable foot, I understand, and absolutely refused to countenance it. And now that he's gone, someone has persuaded the Queen, at very great cost to her own personal reputation, has decided now to make this award. And it is being awarded, the investiture is scheduled for Windsor Castle on the 13th of June. Put that date in your diary. Because we the Workers' Party, and our honorary member, the distinguished gentleman Angus Scott, who tabled the petition, one of the most successful in British history, have decided to organise a protest in Windsor that very day. We expect it to be very well attended. We're ready to cooperate with anyone else who wants to help build that protest, that demonstration. We are ready to work with all people of goodwill, left, right, and centre, because this issue cuts across left, right, and centre issues in a very big way. You don't get 1 million+ signatures in just a few days on a petition unless it does cross ideological boundaries. I know all kinds of people, because they've written to me, spoken to me, called my television show, who don't agree with me politically on much, but who agree with me that to reward a war criminal, a man responsible for not just the deaths of 1 million Iraqis, not just the deaths of an unknown number of victims in Afghanistan, they didn't even attempt to count those, not just the victims in Yugoslavia and elsewhere of the Blair Wars, first the Blair-Clinton Wars, then the Blair-Bush Wars, to reward a war criminal, a man who should be on trial at The Hague, at the International Criminal Court, for war crimes and crimes against humanity, to reward him is a big disgrace on our country. It's a disgrace on the monarchy in this country. It's a disgrace, above all, on Tony Blair, who's putting Her Majesty at this very advanced stage of her life through all of this controversy, when he could solve this matter in a moment by declining, as Harold Macmillan did back in the early 1960s, by declining to be a member of the Order of the Garter. He could end this controversy right now. If he had a scintilla of self-respect, if he had a scintilla of integrity, he would already have done so. But those of you who know Tony Blair, as I know him well, know that self-respect and dignity and integrity are amongst the few commodities in very short supply in the Blair household. He has all the money he could possibly ever have dreamt of. More houses, probably, than he can count. But he doesn't have a clear conscience. He doesn't have integrity to recognize the problems with his conscience. And so to do the right thing, well, I'm afraid we can't count on that. That's why we're going to gather on the 13th of June in Windsor. If you want to write to us about what you can do to help build that demonstration, please do so. It's blairprotest@gmail.com. That's blairprotest@gmail.com. If you think that you can help in any way, if you need any advice on what you can do to help, then please write to Angus Scott and me at that email address. Now, of course, it is possible that faced with the possibility of a mass demonstration in Windsor of all places, on a beautiful summer's day, make your plans now, please, why don't you, that they will change the venue or change the date. That would be a considerable victory for us. It would show that Tony Blair was scurrying around like the rat that he is, seeking again to evade accountability from the British people for his actions, and the opposition, widespread and plentiful to this investiture, may cause us to change the date of the demonstration, or it may allow us to make a celebration instead, a celebration at least of the fact that they were so terrified to award it in the place and on the date that they had already announced that they were forced to scurry away and have it somewhere else or sometime else. Now, of course, stopping Tony Blair from becoming a member of the Order of the Garter is not all that politics is, not even in the top 10 of the issues, problems that we as a country have. But it's part of an ongoing struggle in which I myself have now been involved for decades to hold accountable our leaders for the crimes and the blunders that they commit. Not just because there should be moral hazard for making criminal or bad decisions, but because if there is no moral hazard for making criminal or bad decisions, why should they stop making them? If you can commit crimes and get away with them, if you can be responsible for massive blunders that will reverberate for decades, for an epoch, then why wouldn't you? If you can fill your pockets with your ill-gotten gains because of corruption whilst in office, why would those in office stop doing so? If you can launch yourself into war after war after war and foreign policy disaster one after the other and get away with it, why would you stop doing it? So it's not just about Tony Blair. It's not just about this knighthood. It's about achieving in our country a democratic form of government which is transparent and which is accountable. So look on it as a battle, not the war, but it's a battle, a victory in which will make the war that much easier to win in the longer term. I was against Blair from the start. I was against the Iraq war from the start. I have maintained a relentless criticism of Boris Johnson from the start, and I will no doubt, as long as God gives me breath, continue to do so with his successors. The one thing I'm sure of is that those successors will not include the name Keir Starmer. The Labour Party is defunct. The Labour Party is a dead parrot. The Labour Party has absolutely no chance of leading Britain because it is a misleader. It's not just that the Labour Party has utterly failed to come forward with a constructive alternative to the policies and the practice of dishonour of this Boris Johnson government. It's that Labour is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's that Labour has no intention of doing so, but seeks to pretend that it does. It's that Labour has no intention of acting in the interests of the working people in this country, which is the vast majority of people in this country. It's that it pretends that it will. We know what the Tories are. Just like scorpions sting because they're scorpions, Tories behave like they do because they're Tories. It's that Labour, as a wolf, or actually a hyena, why should I insult the noble wolf? A hyena that has adorned itself with sheep's clothing, harmless, and perhaps even benign. But in fact, the wickedness of a Keir Starmer British government would be just as bad, maybe even worse than a new Tory Prime Minister and a new Tory leader. We make no distinction between Labour and the Conservatives, so don't start coming to us in by-elections yet to come, some yet even to be announced, and tell us we're splitting the vote. Splitting what vote? We have a responsibility not to choose the lesser of two evils, even if it were possible to delineate which was the lesser of those two evils. Our struggle is against evil itself. I hope that everyone understands that. We seek the oblivion of the misnamed Labour Party. We seek to replace in the affections of the British working class the Labour Party with ourselves, the Workers' Party. I may not get there with you, as somebody once said, but I have been to the mountaintop. I have seen the power of the Lord. I have seen the land of milk and honey that it is possible for us to build in this green and pleasant land. I've seen it in my mind. I've seen it in my dreams. I believe in it. I have always believed in it. And I'm sure that one day, not only that we will get there, but that one day we will have no alternative but to go there. It's socialism or barbarism, you see. The barbarism of war and oppression, the barbarism of exploitation, the barbarism of the despoliation of the only world that we have, the environmental despoliation, the waste and war on which our current system entirely depends. So we're on a march. It will be a long one. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Over the last 2 years, the Workers' Party has been marching along rather well. In the weirdest couple of years in British political history, in which even public meetings have been all but impossible to organise. We have built an organisation in 2 years that has branches from Penzance to Perth, all over this land that we love and seek to lead, and which we will fight to preserve. Come and join us. Follow us at least on social media. Look at our 10-point program. See if you can find anything that isn't common sense socialism in there. Write to us. Join us. We'll be stronger if you do. Every Wednesday, 8 p.m, on all the platforms we can possibly put together. I'm George Galloway, on behalf of the Workers' Party of Britain.